I'm Scott Davis, contract employee with Kentucky League of Cities and retired Paducah police officer. Remember, all our videos are reminders, refreshers, and things to think about to keep you safe. Also, be sure and utilize klc.org. There's a lot of information there, model policies, example forms, and videos to learn from. I hope you take something away from today's video. Today we're looking at the Kentucky League of Cities model policy search and seizure residences. I ask you to read this policy on your own carefully. I'm only going to touch on one section in that policy. In the policy under procedure, you can read it says that officers are directed that there are only 3 lawful methods upon which he or she may enter a person's dwelling. The methods include a warrant, exigent circumstances, or consent. Now, if you have pre-planned on making a home entry, then the policy speaks of a risk assessment matrix prior to entry, then goes into knock and announce and no-knock warrants. Also talks about times, equipment, and so on. I ask you to take the time to go over that in more depth. What I'm wanting to talk about in more detail is the exigent circumstances portion as it pertains to misdemeanors. Notice here as we read in the policy, under N, exigent entry, an officer may enter a dwelling based on emergency circumstances with probable cause when any of the following circumstances exist. Number 1, hot pursuit of a fleeing felon. Remember, we're talking about misdemeanors, so that doesn't apply. Number 2, misdemeanors do not categorically qualify as an exigent circumstance for purpose of warrantless home entry. So there's our first clue. Do not categorically qualify, it says, so we will need something more. Number 3, invoking the exigent circumstances exception to enter a home should rarely be sanctioned when there is probable cause to believe that only a minor offense has been committed. And I think that speaks for itself, minor offense. Number 4, the flight of a suspected misdemeanor does not always justify a warrantless entry into a home. In some cases, it will, but those must be justified by something more than simple flight from apprehension. For example, the seriousness of the crime, the nature of the flight, and surrounding facts need to be taken into consideration. Now, number 5 through 8 gives us just a little bit more clarity. Number 5, imminent destruction of evidence for any crime which is a jailable offense. Number 6, need to prevent a suspect's escape. Number 7, risk of danger to police or others inside or outside the dwelling. Number 8, officers may enter a dwelling without a warrant when they have an objective, reasonable basis for believing that an occupant is seriously injured or imminently threatened with such an injury. Number 9, once exigency has ended, officers should secure the scene and obtain a search warrant. So once we make it inside, we see what we need to see, take appropriate action, we get out. If you want to go back in, you're going to have to get a warrant. Number 10, the fact that an area is a crime scene does not create automatic exigency. There is no crime scene exception to the warrant requirement. So with all that being said, it's really not cut and dry. There are a lot of moving parts here, several things to take into consideration. This is one of those case-by-case situations. It's all going to depend on what you have at that moment. And that's sometimes may be the problem. We may not be handling what we have at the moment correctly, or maybe we just don't know. With the 10 things I just covered in the policy, I would think twice before I ran, pushed, demanded, or forced my way into a house over a misdemeanor without having some pretty good evidence or probable cause to back it up. So with that being said, don't build your call up into something more than it is to get what you want. That will rarely work out for you in the end. So for example, let's say you stop Joe for a traffic violation. He jumps out of the car and happens to run into a residence. You quickly follow behind him. Do you run into the residence? Do I run, push, demand, force my way into that house? Well, most of us would say no. It's not covered in the 10 things that we just read. But here comes the building up. What if Joe's a felon? What if Joe is flushing contraband? What if Joe ran in there to assault someone? Well, now I'm trying to convince myself that I should go in there. Do I have any evidence or probable cause to believe that Joe is doing any of these things? You may convince yourself to go in just to find out that Joe doesn't have insurance and you have unlawfully entered into a residence. May not even be his residence. Like I've said before, officers are under a microscope more now than before, and you have to be doing these things by the book. There is case law out there with so many other cases to look at. I would challenge you to read some of them. Here are just a few that you can look up. Welsh v. Wisconsin, Illinois v. MacArthur, Stanton v. Sims, Brigham City v. Stewart, just to name a few. I see local videos, I've heard the talk out there where these things are happening. Make sure you know this policy or your policy and know the law before you enter a home over a misdemeanor without a warrant. I hope this reminder was helpful. Thank you guys and stay safe.